Hello and welcome to our latest Broadstone webinar. We're going to be discussing the importance of reviewing your employee benefit strategy post-COVID. This might be something that you already have well in hand, or you might be wondering where to start or even why. Our panellists are going to be discussing some of the key issues that you might want to consider. My name is Rachel Meadows, and I work within our employee benefits consulting practice, heading up our pensions and savings proposition.
Hi, I'm Sue Burke. I head up the risk and health proposition at Broadstone, and I also have a portfolio of my own clients.
Hi, so I'm Sophie Forrest from Forrest HR. We provide outsourced HR solutions to small, medium-sized businesses that don't have it as an internal resource.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And thanks for joining us today, Sophie and Sue.
Oh.
So when we look at reviewing your employee benefits strategy, why is it that this is so important to consider at the moment for employers? Sue?
I think the last 18 months has just been absolutely crazy. We talk about unprecedented times so many times, and it actually is. There's been so much change in the industry, and employees have had to navigate that, whether that's been furlough that they've had to continue for their staff, whether that's been sort of additional pressures from home working and just general sort of stress of the actual sort of pandemic and all the issues that has actually caused.
It's a huge burden, isn't it, on staff and on employers as well. And Sophie, what has the impact of all that been on HR teams in particular?
I think what we've seen is, the pressure on the NHS as a result of the pandemic. The wait lists are much longer, which has obviously been a huge factor. I think individuals are wanting to see that their employer is implementing other options available, whether that's through private medical or cash plans, and as a result of the recruitment market, which I believe is really booming at the moment. It's really key to be an employer of choice. So it's very competitive with benefit schemes and making sure that it's all completely tip top, because that is going to be what's going to be attracting your staff.
So important, especially with all the talk in the news at the moment about staff shortages and skill shortages. That's absolutely relevant and pressing for a lot of employers. And has the nature of what staff are looking for from their employers changed then over the last 18 months?
Yeah, I believe it has. I think there's definitely an emphasis on like I said, on the private medical side. I think it's more to it now. There's much more elements of interest. Making sure that the pension is of appropriate. It's an appropriate scheme. Other things to consider as well. Long-term sickness cover. Life insurance and stuff as well. I think it's not so much that they're wanting to see anything hugely different. I think it's just making sure that it's really present.
Yeah, I think I'd add to that. I think it's sort of almost a time for reflection, because there's been so much change, and employers want to get more out of actually what they've got as an employee benefit. People are asking for more. They're actually using added value services more for the first time. And I think there's just a general realization that if you actually do have some benefits in place, that we need to be careful that we're actually able to organise a strategy so that they're actually being used and communicated really well.
Yeah. So essentially, if you haven't reviewed what you've got and what you might need in the last 18 months, you might not even be getting the best out of what you've got in place, let alone know if you've got any gaps to consider. Moving on from that, but very similar linked topic, well-being has been such a massive buzzword right now. And is that one of the key areas where staff are looking for more support from their employers than they have in the past?
Definitely, and I think what you're also seeing, or certainly what we've seen when employers are recruiting, and in their sort of advert, as it were, is that they are actually promoting the fact that they have a health and wellbeing package in place for employees. They have a strategy, they have programs, they take it all very, very seriously. I think there's there is some good, wellbeing packages out there. I think there's still, there are some that are sort of limited, but I think there's some great options out there for businesses of all sizes. So, there's no reason why an employer couldn't be looking at a wellbeing program or strategy for their business. It should be very important.
Yeah, so it's not limited by size or budget. Really, there's something out there for all employers.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, so I think there's just been a growing realization that wellbeing impacts on employees' working lives massively, and whether that's productivity, how they sort of interact with their colleagues, whether they've got sort of mental health issues, but also their physical well-being and financial well-being. I think for the first time, it's been very apparent that this is all connected. It's not just one thing. It's not just mental health. It's not just physical well-being. It's everything together. It's the overall approach. And I think that's what I'm seeing more within the industry, trying to address well-being as a more holistic issue.
Yeah, I completely agree, actually. And I was just going to say, on the financial well-being side, it's so apparent these days that if you do have financial concerns or worries, that those really do impact on your overall health and well-being. And the big issue for employers is that then impacts on absence rates, it impacts on turnover, it impacts on morale. There's all sorts of measurable and sometimes unmeasurable impacts, of not addressing those aspects of financial well-being. And certainly we've seen a really big uptick in demand for financial education in particular, and guidance around pension saving. So that's, the traditional way that employers would get involved in financial education is helping staff understand the benefit they've got within their pension scheme. If staff can't afford to retire, that causes massive issues in terms of succession, sometimes even capability, depending on the nature of people's roles. If they're not able to afford to retire at a point where their health might naturally lead them to do so. We've seen so many people's plans change as a result of the pandemic, and as with so many of these challenges that are facing employers and HR teams and individuals, it really isn't a case of one size fits all, or there's one nature of change or one solution, because, some people might have brought their retirement plans forward because of the pandemic. Maybe they've been furloughed and they've quite liked, having a little bit more free time, or they don't want to return into stressful industries post-pandemic and try and deal with, rebuilding businesses after the recovery. On the flip side, though, it's led to lots of people looking at their affordability and having to push plans backwards. So it's really important that your staff have access to that information and guidance so that they know where they are. I think the key thing that we're seeing, though, is that both the demand from employers and also in terms of what employees are looking for from their employer, it's much broader than just pensions. So they're looking for general financial education. They're looking for particularly help with their shorter term financial resilience. So there's nothing like a pandemic to make you question if you've got enough rainy day funds in the bank, or whether you're insured enough. Have you got enough protection in place for your family if the worst was to happen? So having access to financial advice at key points, access to financial education, things like workplace savings products like ISA are growing in popularity. A lot of employers are signposting to debt advice. We're seeing real challenges on that side of things. And I think debt particularly plays into those overall other well-being points, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And obviously the stress and anxiety that those things are actually causing people, we're seeing reflected in sort of absence going forward, which is obviously harder to actually keep a track of as well during a pandemic when lots of people are working from home, and sort of meaning that people can actually get that support. And what we're finding as well with things with where people have got mental health worries, having that interaction and help very early on can have a massive impact, and financial well-being has a massive impact overall.
Absolutely. And coming back to sort of more traditional health and general well-being, what then would you say are the key issues that employers and their staff are facing?
I think at the moment, the very sort of big issue of NHS waiting lists, the NHS has always had waiting lists. It's the reason that we do have private medical insurance in the first place. But at the moment, the lists are just getting absolutely massive, and people are very, very concerned about that. People waiting really long times for treatment. And I think that's actually going to have an impact on the industry overall, because we're sort of seeing inquiries where people may not necessarily have gone down the private medical insurance route. Also GP availability. I think there's actually something on the news this morning about the importance of face-to-face meetings. The industry reacted incredibly well with regards to sort of GP virtual services with the pandemic. So lots of people were able to actually see their GP or see a GP remotely. But what we're seeing now is lots of cases where perhaps those remote sessions have not been able to sort of pick up on some very sort of subtle symptoms that people may have had. So there's a real sort of need for people, or a want to actually sort of see people face to face. Overall, the absence management sort of issue that employers have had to face as well. It's difficult to sort of judge what's happening to your workforce when you don't have that day-to-day sort of check-in in the office. Although we know that lots of our clients have been incredibly successful in keeping in touch, it's not quite the same as having that sort of office presence.
I suppose the danger is people that are quiet, if they're out of sight and quiet, is that's quite difficult for line managers.
I think so. And also, if people are struggling, it may well be that if it's something mental health related, or somebody suffering from stress and anxiety, it may well be that their colleagues would pick up on things because they'll see them in the office or their workplace, and they'll pick up on those subtle signs that things aren't quite right, which is sort of harder to do when you're remote. And obviously we hide behind our screens to some extent, and I think it's sort of it's more difficult to sort of pick up on those issues. Plus, obviously, people are more remote, and whilst lots of people are very sort of used to sort of dealing on their own, other people are more vulnerable and they miss that interaction.
No, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, looking at some of the impact of people missing those face-to-face GP appointments in particular, are you seeing a big uptick in demand from employers for things like cancer screening programs and health screening programs?
Yeah, we are, because obviously people are very concerned about what symptoms have been missed and not having that sort of interaction. So we are actually seeing an increase in cancer screening and just general screenings, to be honest, not just cancer screening. The industry has been able to sort of continue with lots of screenings. However, some of the actual services have been reduced, and we're starting to see those services resumed where they might have been a basic screening process. They're able to provide more detailed blood tests now. So we are seeing a return to more standard approach cancer screening and other screenings, but there has been sort of a time when that hasn't been as available.
Great. And they're not necessarily pandemic related, but I suppose with this increased focus on overall well-being, one of the other words and trends that we're seeing increasingly is employers looking to provide support for their staff around the menopause.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been so much in the press and on television about menopause, and at last sort of employers and everybody is actually starting to realise the massive impact that this can have on people's lives. And we're looking at sort of ways to find strategies and solutions to help people go through that process, and also to let them know that there is assistance available. So we're seeing a lot of interest, and also people looking for assistance and where they can go to for support. And employers are sort of really happy to support that.
It's great to be awkward about asking for support from their employer in the past, but things that have a real impact on your day-to-day life and your working life. So, I mean, Sophie, there is such a massive variety of issues that HR are trying to address. How do they begin to approach this?
I think you just need to just break it down a bit, rather than trying to sort of resolve, everything all in one go. I think it's really important that the businesses are involving HR to let them, to help navigate through this. There's other options as well, in terms of getting that feedback from staff a bit more, looking at employee engagement surveys. A lot of my clients are doing this, and not just for, the benefit side of things, but in general, in general employee well-being, how are they? And obviously they're starting to be coming back to the office now. So, there is some interactions. There's still many businesses just not going back to the office. So it's, that in itself, that management of hybrid working has been a challenge as well. Yeah, I think, like I said, it's just breaking it down, taking the time to sort of really look at all of these issues properly and individually.
I think that's a really good point. And I think when, traditionally, I suppose, when we're thinking about employee benefits, maybe it's tempting to jump quickly to solutions or quickly to product options. Whereas, you make a really good point about getting feedback from staff, other key stakeholders, and actually having quite a measured and strategic approach and trying to figure out how all these things interact and how much they'll be valued by your staff as well. Because, we sort of loop back round, this isn't all paternalistic. Obviously there's a paternalistic side to this, but this is really key to recruitment and retention, isn't it?
I think that's a really good point, Rachel. I think sort of what we have sort of seen as well is a change in what people want. Because everything has changed so much over the last 18 months and benefits have as well. And also the workforce, what people are actually doing for their jobs, where they're working, things that were sort of in place and what people actually wanted 18 months ago may not be the same now. The whole sort of system has changed for them as well. So I think carrying out surveys, finding out what people do actually want, what's important to them, is actually a really good way of actually finding out more about how people actually want their strategies and their actual benefits to look going forward. I don't think we can make assumptions anymore as to what is the right fit.
That makes sense. And from a budget perspective, I suppose that also helps employers to focus spend in those areas where staff are going to want it most. So it doesn't necessarily mean more spend. It might just mean being more effective with the budget that you've already got in place.
Yeah, I think so. And especially when budgets are so tight, because we're seeing lots of need and want for new benefits, but not an awful lot of money to spend at the moment until people sort of get back on their feet post-pandemic.
Yeah, and that is a real challenge, isn't it? Because I think from the employee side, we are seeing quite a lot more demand for more varied benefit packages than, particularly benefits that maybe appeal to different segments of your workforce more than others. Things that might, really appeal to younger staff earlier in their career might not hold the same appeal for older staff. And it's trying to be a little bit creative with the budget that you've got. And that's where, I guess we boil back to the same points, don't we? Find out what your staff want, put a strategy in place, have a plan. That's the best way to try to tackle this.
I think some of the, you see many businesses have these, like the flexible benefits packages where, there's a selection of benefits that you can have access to, and you literally pick and choose which ones you want. That's been really effective with a lot of businesses. Again, that helps with that flexibility as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that can be really cost effective too, can't it?
I think the way benefits are communicated as well. Do staff actually know what they have? How do those benefits interact with their other benefits, and how do they access them? Because I think that's one of the sort of things that we've noticed. If you give a refresh, if you're sort of advising staff exactly what they do have, don't take it for granted that they actually know all the different nuances. I mean, lots of the added value benefits, for instance, just communicating what those are at each renewal can make a big difference, because people may not have noticed what they've got last time. A fresh communication, and also where that information is held is really important. Is it easy for staff to actually to access that information?
I think that is quite key, isn't it? The right information at the right time, but that staff can also access at the right time, because your benefit renewal window, when you traditionally talk to staff about what they've got in their benefits, that might not be the point at which they think, yeah, okay, that's really relevant to me.
Yeah, absolutely. If somebody's struggling and somebody's sort of feeling really, really stressed or anxious, and their renewal was 6 months ago, they might not have their EAP in their mind. But if that's sort of a constant reminder, I mean, even simple things like sort of flyers in sort of common areas, or while we're working from home, a refresh, a note to everybody, do you know what you've got this? Even if it's sort of signposting in a really basic way, it can just remind people exactly what they've got. And remember that a lot of these benefits can be used by family members as well. So it might not be the actual member that's having an issue, but it could be one of their family members that needs that support.
No, that's a great point. I mean, with that in mind, are we seeing more employers asking for access to things like flexible benefit platforms? So, you know, more like a one-stop shop where they can direct their staff to get information on all of the benefits that they've got.
We are, absolutely, yes. We've got the old challenge that obviously people want to have something in place, but budget is quite tight. So I think something that is actually able to sort of bridge that gap where we're able to communicate, but may not be a massive spend at the moment, is really important. And I think having something where everything is one place, where employers can actually use that as a forum as well, has been really useful. I think there's a real need to basically communicate and hold all of those bits of information, because we have so much collateral now. A lot of the actual benefits in place have changed massively over the last 18 months. And I know that sort of our guys have had a real challenge of keeping in touch and keeping up to date with everything, because things are evolving, which is amazing. It's great how the industry's actually reacted, because there's been so many changes, you know, for the better with lots of these products developing. But it just means that, you know, you've almost got to keep refreshing what you've got to members too.
Yeah, and that's really key, isn't it? Real-time, personalised, relevant information, and that can be accessed by your workforce, whether they're in the office, at home, or anywhere else for that matter these days. I mean, Sophie, we're seeing an increase in HR teams looking to try and personalise and tailor as much of that content as they can.
Yeah, no, definitely, it's, employers are definitely wanting to be giving that personal approach, or certainly promoting that personal approach to staff. I think it's really key what we're saying as well about making sure that everything's, that if you've got these schemes in place, that they know all of the details, that it's there ready for them to pick up and to use, but yeah, and all of these things, they're all things that you can help businesses with. They don't have to, it doesn't have to feel like a minefield. There are experts on hand to help.
Absolutely. And I mean, as well as some of these, sort of newer or more innovative things that HR teams can look at, traditional benefits have really been quite highly in demand, haven't they, over the last 18 months? And so,
yeah, we've actually seen an increase in life assurance. I mean, obviously, we've seen so many people lose their desks through COVID. It's been in the news all the time. So it's really brought home how important it is to be able to sort of look after your family. And lots of employers have approached us for illustrations, for sort of advice and how to actually put a scheme in place. And it's one of those sort of benefits that isn't that expensive to put in place, and there's so much choice available. So yeah, we've seen a real increase in life assurance.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me, because especially on the pension side as well, it's been so important to do some of the real basics, like, another expression of wish form exercise, just to make sure all of your members have filled in those nomination forms, that they're current and up to date, they're naming the right people. And these are things that don't cost a lot of money, but they are a massively important part of an effective HR strategy, aren't they?
Absolutely. I mean, it's really just reinforcing a lot of those, not basic, but sort of I guess sort of standardized bits as well. I mean, training. We have our sister company, Forest Training Academy. We've done a lot of line management training as well with businesses. We work very closely with West Kent Mind, who do mental health first aid training. We've had a lot of uptake on that, and we were referring to that earlier when we were sort of saying about colleagues in the office, or whatever your workspace is, in terms of recognizing when some of their colleagues are sort of struggling. most of the time you would be able to identify that, but you would definitely be able to identify that if you're a mental health first aider. Myself and my team are all mental health first aid trained. It's a fantastic training, and it's an eye opener to help look out for these signs. And having these individuals placed in businesses, sometimes they don't want to go and speak to their manager or to HR, but if they've got somebody of comparative level that is available to them and just has that natural ability to welcome those opportunities with individuals to talk things through, I think are just hugely beneficial.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Sophie, because we've seen an awful lot of inquiries, and it's something that we know has helped a lot of our clients enormously. And also when people have conducted the training, we're seeing people come back again for sort of refreshers and sort of just to keep, their training up to date as well, because it is so important.
But there's other stuff as well, as well as the official mental health first aid training, as you were saying, Sue, like the refreshers, there's, a lot of these providers will happily, come into businesses to do, mental health awareness or stress management, workshops or talks, these sort of, like lunch and learn sessions, these have been invaluable, totally invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think one of the key things that I'm taking from your comments there as well, Sue and Sophie, is that with things like your training and things like your benefit strategy, it's absolutely not a case of set and forget, is it? It's something that you've got to be actively reviewing and looking at what is your package now, but what is your ongoing strategy in terms of when do you review, why do you review, what inputs do you take?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, excuse me, money is sort of very tight at the moment, and I think everybody wants to get the most out of their actual benefits, and that's a case of looking at what you've got. Is everything sort of fit for purpose? Do you have things that people aren't using? So, what we've seen, especially over the last 12 months, is if benefits aren't being utilised and there isn't any sort of real perception that it's sort of being well received by the staff, people are actually looking at that and thinking, okay, well, we won't just leave it in place for the sake of it. We'll take that one out. What else can we provide? What else are people actually looking for? What do they actually want to get out of the actual package now, as opposed to what has gone before? So we're seeing review, massive increases in actually reviewing what people have got.
You're right. I think budget challenges are a massive driver, aren't they? And they're likely to continue to be the case. I think for the foreseeable future, there's all sorts of challenges out there still for businesses, isn't there? But as you say, it doesn't need to be an expensive thing to do to review your employee benefit package, and there are options available regardless of what size of employer you are, and actually some of the things that you can put in place can actually be cost saving, can't they, if you're not using things like salary exchange or salary sacrifice, if actually not having benefits in place is costing you more in absence or sick pay or succession or other HR issues as well. We mentioned staff not being able to afford to retire earlier, but I suppose that's the least of your worries if you've got staff that can't do the job because they're not fit for a whole host of reasons that you might be able to alleviate.
Yeah, I think also sort of early intervention as well is sort of really being recognised now as a way of managing absence and sort of getting people support very early on in their absence. Lots of plans that employers will actually include early intervention assistance, and as Sophie said, the insurers are often really happy to come in to talk to staff, and that might well be about sort of the actual wellbeing packages in place, about how to access them, about sort of mental health and how to get support, but again utilising those services and offering support. And I think the other really important point that Sophie made was about managers and line management, because obviously they are sort of at the firing line of all of these queries, all of this sort of new knowledge that people are seeking, and also they're having to sort of cope with things for the first time in a really difficult environment, and it's really important to sort of make sure that the managers are being trained and getting support as well.
Yeah, I think that's hugely important, isn't it? And I mean, if you get these things right, they really can help to reinforce your corporate culture. And I guess on the flip side, if you get them wrong, actually they can really undermine your corporate culture, can't they, as well? So it does impact quite a lot within your organisation. This isn't just a problem within HR for HR, is it?
I think as well, think about obviously helping with managers and stuff as well. And certainly for us, we work very closely with occupational health providers as well. And I think these are, those providers have been really helpful. They're always helpful for HR, but I think, particularly over the last sort of couple of years, really, with all of the stuff related to the pandemic. And equally, they are also happy to, obviously there's the referral process, but it's been really beneficial for us to sort of get advice. If you have a good contact with a good provider, then they're happy to give you advice as well on how to deal with matters. And it just goes back again to that early intervention.
No, that's really useful. I mean, I think from all of the things that we talked about this morning, it does seem to boil back to making sure that what you've got in place is effective, that all the benefits you've got work well together, that they're communicated in the right way. And Sophie, coming back to one of your terms right from the beginning of the webinar today, talking about positioning yourself as an employer of choice, particularly in these really challenging recruitment markets in a number of sectors.
Absolutely. And it's really important. I think it's important, because it doesn't have to be, I think with some businesses, they think about, to have a really decent benefits package, it's, it's going to cost a lot. We're obviously trying to be careful with costs, and of course, but, it doesn't have to be a hugely expensive exercise. It doesn't have to have any cost attached to for some benefits. There's lots of different ways that you can avoid high costs.
I think I'd add to that as well. With we're seeing a lot more provision put in place for smaller companies, and also as the market sort of reacted to the pandemic, a lot of the really basic products like life assurance will not just provide life assurance now. They will have GP remote services, some have wellbeing, some actually have probate and help services like that. So you can get an awful lot of value out of those products as well. It might not be a massive cost, but if you're sort of using those benefits carefully and communicating them effectively, you could actually get more for your money.
Well, hopefully we've given you some food for thought and at least given you an idea of some of the issues that you might want to consider or talk about with your Broadstone consultant when you're reviewing your employee benefit strategy. To finish, I'd just like to thank our panel members for taking the time to join us and share their thoughts. Thank you very much, Sophie Forrest from Forrest Group and Susan Burke from Broadstone. At Broadstone, we've helped many clients to review their benefit strategy in light of the COVID pandemic for many of the reasons discussed today, and also many that we haven't. As a valued client, we'd love to ensure that we're doing the same for you and maximising your benefit strategy and your benefit spend. If you would like to discuss this further, please contact your account manager for a consultation, or do feel free to fill out the form on this page and one of our consultants will be in touch to discuss the next steps. Thanks again for watching.